Chapter 24. Back at his condo, Matt pulled JV aside for a minute. Is there any way you guys could do without Alex and I tonight? That would depend on why. Her eyes narrowed and watched him carefully while waiting for his answer. He took a deep breath and looked at the floor a moment. I'd like to take her out. Out why? Damn it, JV, are you gonna make me say it? He looked up at her, frustrated. I want to take her on a date. Is that all right with you? Actually, yes it is. And it's about time. She leaned in and gave him a brief hug. You two go ahead and go out. There's nothing here that we can't handle for a couple hours. Thanks sis, he said before going in search of Alex. He found her in the kitchen, standing in front of the open refrigerator. Anything in there look good? Not really, she pulled her mouth to one side. Then how about you let me take you out? He watched her for a couple seconds. We can get something to eat and I can show you around my town. Closing the fridge, she turned and looked at him. I don't know. I mean, she looked past him toward the living room. What about the others? I've cleared it. They're fine here, and you can take a couple hours to spend with me. He reached out and ran one finger down her upper arm. Please? She looked uncertain for a moment, then grinned. Let's do it. Great. He couldn't help the grin that spread across his own face, hers was infectious. We can leave right away or you can change if you want. He ran his eyes downward, taking in the denim shorts and tank top she'd worn to the park this afternoon. I think you look great just the way you are. He resisted the urge to touch her again. She might not welcome him being so familiar so soon. Let's just go, she said after only a moment's hesitation. All I brought was casual and comfort with the exception of one outfit nice enough to meet your con in, should it be necessary. It didn't occur to me I might need date clothes. Her cheeks turned a pretty pink. Like I said, you look great just the way you are. You're sweet. Hey, can I have a couple minutes before we go? Take as long as you want. I don't need long, just a couple minutes to use the restroom and talk to my shaku. No problem. He watched her go, looking forward to a couple hours with just the two of them. Not that they would have any privacy, or that he really wanted that. It was more that he wanted some time away from their friends and family, to get to know each other. He went in the living room and sat on the sofa near JV, while he waited. In what seemed like no time, Alex came down the hall. I'm ready when you are, she said. She hadn't changed clothes, but she'd let her hair down and done something to her face. She'd changed her makeup. Wow. He stood to meet her, but aware of their audience, he avoided touching her. I'm ready. Reaching into his pocket for his keys, he turned and looked at his sister. Don't wait up for us, Mom. JV made a face. You be nice to my friend. His sister said with serious eyes before waving at them both. Don't stay out all night. This time it was Alex who made the face. What'll you do? Ground me? She stuck her tongue out at JV before turning to Matt. Come on, let's get out of here. Matt set one hand lightly on her hip and opened the door for her. He hadn't missed that Bobby sat and watched the whole exchange without a word. He thumbed the button on his key fob to unlock the truck, then went to her side to open the door for her. You know, I can open my door. She laughed. I know, but I was raised to treat a woman right. Especially when I want to get on her good side. Isn't that the point of dating anyway? To get to know and get on someone's good side? He let her climb in on her own, sensing that if he tried to help her she might get cranky. Once she was inside, he closed the door then went around and got in the driver's seat. So where are we going? She asked as he started the truck and backed it out of the space. I thought I'd take you to my favorite little pub. We can eat, maybe have a drink or two, then we can walk for a little bit, just kinda talk. Sounds good. She looked out the windshield and her window, her attention constantly shifting as she watched the town move by. A little while later, he pulled into Rosie's. He climbed out of the truck, went around and opened her door. Anticipating the move, she waited for him, sliding down and stepping aside so he could close the door. He wanted to touch her again, but hesitated. You can touch me. She looked at him with a slight smile. I can see you holding back, but I feel it too. Don't worry about offending me. Remember, we're a more tactile group than most. It's been a long time since I dated anyone. He gave a sad smile. I'm not sure I know how anymore. Just do what comes naturally. Don't worry so much about bothering me. She laid one hand on his arm. I know it's a little awkward for you, it is for me too, though not for the same reason. We'll work it out together. Her smile was encouraging. All right. He smiled back. Let's go inside. He waited until she'd turned toward the door before dropping one hand to the small of her back as he walked beside her. See, I like that. She shot him a steamy look. Me too, it feels good. Natural. The interior was dim and cozy. They found an out-of-the-way booth, where they would have the illusion of privacy. A waitress brought them menus and water, then left them alone. You said your dad is sick. Tell me more about your family. Do you have any siblings? Matt didn't bother to resist the urge to reach across the table and cover her hand with his. I used to. She looked down at their hands. But my brother died before his first shift. I'm sorry to hear that. Matt slid his other hand under hers and held it between both of his. I don't want to push, but would you like to tell me what happened? It's been a long time, and while I miss him, it doesn't hurt so much anymore. She took a deep breath. Tyler was several years older than me. I was not quite 10. He was 14 and thought he was invincible. He was goofing off on horseback and fell. The doctor told us he broke his neck and died instantly. For a long time, I've wondered if maybe he could have survived, if he'd already shifted and could heal better. Now I don't think it would have mattered. I'm sorry. I know from experience it's hard when you lose someone. I can't imagine having to deal with it so young. Matt's heart ached for what she'd been through. It was hard, but we got through it, and it made me who I am now. She squeezed his hand and shrugged one shoulder. I always had chores, but I probably never would have had the major role on the ranch that I have now. Ty was supposed to be the one to inherit the ranch. Not that I wouldn't have inherited anything, but I wouldn't have had to do the work. Were you close to him? As close as a 10-year-old girl can be to a 14-year-old brother. I worshipped him. A fond smile curved her mouth at the memory. I went to my best friend's house to play one day and came home to find he had died. How did it happen? He kept her hand in his. It felt good. He liked the connection with her. It seems he decided he wanted to learn to mount a running horse, I don't know why. Maybe too many movies, I don't know. Anyway, from what I've been able to figure, he was trying to do just that. He got the horse running in circles in the paddock, and would try to grab the saddle on the way by. Something didn't go the way it was supposed to, he was thrown and broke his neck in the fall. I was told he died instantly. I'm still hung on mounting a running horse. Matt blinked and shook his head. I will admit though that teenage boys do a lot of shit that doesn't make much sense. I think hormones do something to our brains. Ty was always ready for a new adventure, it didn't matter how wild, he would try it. He was a good brother. He watched out for me and made sure no one picked on me, but he had no fear. He thought he was invincible. Her eyes had a glassy, distant look that told him her mind wasn't there with him. That's a lot to deal with at such a young age. It is. I didn't have to deal with it all then. I've put it together over the years, bit by bit. You said your dad's sick. What's wrong with him, exactly? He tried to change the subject. He didn't want to upset her by talking too much about something so painful. He wasn't sure this question was any better. But how else would he get to know her? How else would he find out about her family? He's got a heart problem, so every time he gets a cold, every time the flu hits, it's hard on him, and I worry it's going to kill him. You worry, but has anything happened? Has JV looked at him? My dad's not one of us. JV's done what she can, but because he's not like us, that's limited. I get it. I had a similar problem with Connie, though not with JV. He gave her a lopsided smile. The waitress brought their food, and the chatting slowed. Conversation turned to current events and more pleasant ways to get to know each other. After dinner, Matt drove her down to a nearby shopping district. He parked not far from his favorite little ice cream parlor. Inside, he bought them each a cone. Come on. He walked slowly down the sidewalk, looking in windows and talking. We talked about your family during dinner. Now it's your turn to question me. You know JV already, and you met our folks at the wedding, so you already know most everything about me, but do you want to know anything else? Matt held his cone in his left hand, because Alex held his right as they walked. I don't know. She was quiet for several steps. I'm curious about your life. Why are you in Denver? I know you're not from here. How did you end up here? Actually, I moved to Denver to go to school. I went to UC Denver. He looked down the street, without really seeing what was in front of him. This is where Connie wanted to go to school, so where I came too. We stayed after I graduated. I considered leaving after she died, but I couldn't bear to. The idea of leaving all the reminders of her, I couldn't do it. He fell quiet for several steps. That's not true anymore. It hasn't been for a while. I just had no reason to go, no motivation to pick up and leave. They strolled down the sidewalk talking and holding hands. It's so different here. Alex tilted her head to one side, as she looked at something ahead of them. What? Matt tried to follow her sight line, but couldn't figure out what she was talking about. The sunset. Her eyes flicked from building to building along the skyline, as she watched the sun disappear behind them. It's pretty, but not at all like I see it at home. It never occurred to me how different it could be. As the evening cooled, he went from holding her hand to his arm across her shoulders. She leaned in, seeming to enjoy his nearness. When they reached his truck, he opened the passenger door and waited for her to climb inside, before closing the door and going around. I kinda miss a real pickup, she said, after he got in and started the engine. Why? He felt his brow crease with confusion. 'Cause without this thing here. She thumped the console between their seats. I could slide over next to you. I'd like that. Matt smiled, looked in the mirror and backed the SUV out of the space. I wish we had more time, Alex said, her voice low. Me too. He reached over and covered her hand with his. When you coming down again? She kept her face turned away. He suspected it was so he couldn't see how she felt while they talked about being apart. Matt hesitated a few seconds, then made a quick decision. I was thinking maybe I'd come down for the 4th. The idea of spending Independence Day in the small town was appealing, and spending it with her sounded even better. Really? She turned to look at him, her face bright with excitement. He hadn't planned on making the trip so soon, the holiday was less than 3 weeks away, but her reaction sealed it. He'd book the flight as soon as he got back from taking them to the airport, tomorrow. Sure, why not? He grinned, enjoying her obvious happiness. But don't you have people here who will miss you? I have friends here, but no one all that close. Glancing away from the road, he met her gaze for a second. Didn't JV tell you Steve's my best friend? She said he was growing up. She sounded doubtful. I thought you might have friends in your clan here though. I know people, we're friendly, but there's no one close. For the last 2.5 years, I've worked and done what I had to get by. I visited my family and attended the clan functions I couldn't find a way out of. He knew his tone had turned somber. That's so sad. Matt glanced at her, then back to the road. It's life, baby. His eyes flicked from the road to her several times. But I'm through just existing. He squeezed her hand and lifted it to his mouth, where he kissed the back. I'm ready to live again. They made the rest of the drive home in a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. After parking in front of his condo, he went around and opened her door, waiting until she slid down and her feet were on the ground before moving closer. He crowded her against the truck, hoping the open door would keep his nosy sister from seeing what he was about to do. Alex, his voice was barely above a whisper. She looked up at him, eyes wide and fringed with the delicate dark lace of her lashes. Tell me no. He moved slowly, giving her plenty of time to refuse. Her lips fell open and her breath came in gentle pant. Yes. Are you sure? Shut up and kiss me already. She stretched up on her toes and her lips met his halfway. Instinct took over and Matt gave in to desire. His hands fell to her hips, then slid around her waist as her taste exploded across his tongue. Her scent filled his nose. Alex's hands slid up his neck and cupped his face as she pulled him closer. Her tongue rubbed against his and heat shot through his body. This couldn't go any farther, not here, not now. Matt pulled away, breaking the kiss, but he didn't let her go. Instead, he dropped his forehead against hers and closed his eyes for a second. Wow, he whispered. That's one way to say it. Her breath came in soft gasps. I don't want to let you go. Matt lifted his head and looked down at her upturned face. Not tonight to go inside, and definitely not tomorrow to let you go home. I don't want to let you go either. She wore a sad smile. But I have to. Dad does okay for a few days, but more than just a few without me, and he exhausts himself. She rubbed one thumb along the side of his neck while she talked, sending shivers of want through him. He wanted to pick her up and carry her inside, past everyone else and to his bed, but it was too soon. Too fast. He knew if he gave in to the urge now, he'd regret it later. Tomorrow or the day after, he'd be flooded with guilt for forgetting Connie so quickly. He knew it would happen in time, and if he took the time needed, he would be ready, but 0 to bed in just a couple days wasn't right and would haunt him later. It's okay. He squeezed her against him a moment. The space will be good for us both. He dropped a kiss on her nose, then let her go. Stepping back, he took her hand and closed the truck door before hitting the button to lock the vehicle. It will give us both time to be sure, he said with a smile. I'm getting the sweet end of this deal. You're beautiful and sexy, I'm old and set in my ways. Alex laughed. You're not old. Pretty sure I am. Matt looked at her a moment, then opened the condo door. See, Steve is old, I tell him so all the time. Yeah, I've heard you writing him about it. Alex smiled. Well. Matt looked at the ceiling, delaying playfully. I don't like to admit it, but he's almost 3 months my junior. Alex laughed. A light, lilting laugh that made Matt's smile spread into a grin. She put one hand on his arm. So you harass him about being old, just to get to him? Matt gave her a lopsided smile and shrugged without another word. You two look like you had fun, JV said from the sofa where she sat sideways, leaning against her mate's chest, a familiar position for the two of them. We did. Alex turned to look at her friend, her smile never fading. You finally admitting you're old? Steve said from his spot being JV. I figured she might as well know what she's getting. Don't let him fool you, Steve said to Alex. He's more concerned about my age than his own. JV elbowed her mate and Matt rolled his eyes. As much as he'd enjoyed the evening alone with her, this was something they'd have to deal with. Eventually Steve would get tired of digging at him, until then he just had to field it. He looked at his watch. It's getting late, isn't past your bedtime, old man? He lifted one brow at his friend, and laughed when the other man casually flipped him off. As much as they dug at one another, they both knew that whenever it was needed, the other guy would have his back.